good afternoon. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. Today, I'm really glad and thrilled to have with me as my guest Heidi Mayon, who's a partner at Simpson Thacher. Heidi, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
I know it's been a long time trying to get this scheduled, so I'm very
Yeah,
excited we finally got a chance to make this work.
definitely. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Sounds good. Well, Heidi, why don't you start before we get launch into your illustrious career? Why don't you tell me a little about why you went to law school in the first place?
Yeah, I went to law school initially because I knew I wanted an advanced degree and was really intrigued by the way law school changed kind of the way you thought about the world and its thinking.
Hmm.
And I actually thought perhaps I would go into some sort of academia and always wanted to be a teacher of some form. And then had the opportunity, we'll get there. I guess I'm skipping ahead. But after getting into law school and digging in, I realized that there was this whole area of corporate law that you never see on TV that was an intersection of a lot of different interests in my life.
Yeah, interesting. So, did you grow up with a family of lawyers or anything like that? Like, was law kind of in your DNA or anything like that?
No, it was not. I grew up, in a pretty blue collar household. My mom was in administration in public schools, and my dad was in the automotive industry. And so they were hardworking people who taught me that, but really no exposure to law. And grew up in Sonoma County, which is, at the time I grew up there was before the wine industry had really moved in. So it was a bit of a rural community.
Yeah, interesting.
Close enough to, the bigger San Francisco Bay Area that I knew something was going on, and wanted to be part of it.
Yeah. So how did you end up discovering, you said obviously you went to corporate securities, but how did you end up discovering that? Is it as a summer law clerk, or how did you discover that?
Yeah. So my first year out of law school, I took a job as sort of a clerk at Pillsbury and Palo Alto. And that was 2000. So I was just at the tail end of, the tech bubble had beginning to see signs of breaking, but hadn't officially broken yet. And so there was still a tremendous amount of IPO work going on in the office, and was able to sort of see the collaborative team nature of that. I grew up playing sports as a kid and was a very avid soccer player, and it always reminded me of that dance you do on the field of somebody's got the ball and everyone's plotting the next move while being supportive, and managing a capital markets transaction has a lot of similarities.
And was that, so you just kind of like fell in love with that practice and never looked back, or did you end up dabbling in other areas at all, or?
No, I fell in love with that practice and never looked back. And, the part that's interesting about that is that I ended up going to Pillsbury for my summer associate class of 2001, where the world had officially melted by that time in terms of cap markets, but was there and very firmly rooted in the idea that I really didn't want to spend my time trying litigation or any of the other practices that were busier and probably would have been a better bet going into getting an offer after your summer. But what it did do is that it kind of opened up a lot of opportunities, because I was one of the few people saying, no, this is what I really want to do. I'm very interested in this. I would love to say I understood strategically what I was doing at the time. But
you can say that now, it's okay.
Yes, exactly. But yes, it's really been a passion of mine since I discovered it.
Well, and so you never really did a lot of startup venture work and that kind of stuff, or did you even dabble in that a little bit? Obviously, being in Silicon Valley, and at the time, I'm sure there was a lot of that going on.
Yes, so I have certainly dabbled in that, and on an occasion, a smaller part of my practice is working with earlier stage founders. But what I really learned is I love the process of marrying a large legal framework into a business purpose or goal. and not to say that isn't true in the earlier stage venture world, but in that space, I often find that there are so many moving parts that oftentimes you're more of a therapist slash business advisor on a very granular level, where I seem to really enjoy kind of the next step of the public arena.
So your area now, how is your career and practice kind of evolved now? You do mostly IPOs, you work with public companies. Give me a feel for the kinds of stuff that you do now.
Definitely. So I work with later stage private companies with plans of some sort of exit, and that, do later stage venture rounds through IPO. Sometimes companies who think they're going public end up being sold, and help support companies through that process, and then really continue on with all of my clients through their evolution as a public company. So that involves securities reporting and 34 Act advisory work, corporate governance, and then any sort of capital markets transaction that comes next. There's always a variety.
And give me a feel for kind of the industries. I mean, I assume your companies do all, but give me a feel for kind of the industries that you worked in.
Definitely. So I've spent a majority of my career focused on technology. Within that space, a lot of consumer retail, having had the pleasure of working with the likes of Poshmark and DoorDash, some digital health companies as well, and a variety of software, clean energy, and some biotech as well. Okay. What I really enjoy about my career choice is that I can be exposed to so many different types of companies, with my core understanding always being the securities laws. But I get to learn a lot about a number of things, and at a pretty deeper, much deeper level, if you're trying to explain to investors or the SEC what is really the driver for somebody's business, you get to know it pretty well. I can't write code, but I can tell you why the code is important. How about that?
And you do life sciences and pharma companies also, some of that as well?
Some of that as well. And those companies are always, I love working with them because they're solving such incredible challenges with such passion. And the flip side is that, I've done a few IPOs where we've worked on rare diseases or other things. And after a while, I realized I'm not a doctor, because spending 8 hours talking about a rare disease and its cure really makes you a little bit worried that perhaps you too are dying at any minute. It's a good space to dabble in, but definitely not where I sleep at night.
Well, it sounds like you stumbled into it, but you found a practice that you really, really love. Have you ever thought about maybe going in-house at some point in your career, or being the GC of a public company and kind of wear that hat?
I have certainly thought about it at various sort of break points in my career. And what I have found is I really enjoy having a bunch of different bosses, for lack of a better term, because it provides incredible variety and the ability to always kind of be in front of the next thing. And I do think that there's certainly this reputation of big law being a pretty hard place to spend your lifetime. But I'm gonna say, being a GC of a public company is not an easy gig.
Not.
So I think all of us who found our way into the practice of law have certainly picked, demanding career choices, and I really like being able to have exposure to a lot of great things and be a deep expert on the securities law in this one area, and kind of looking forward around corners for my clients on things that they otherwise don't have time to come up to speed on.
Well, one nice thing, it sounds like in what you do, you get a chance to work with both founders, who are the scientific head, but then you also obviously get to work with board members, so you get more industry. So, I mean, is that something that you also enjoy in terms of the variety, in terms of who you interact with and on the client side?
100%. There's not the number of personalities I encounter during a day is actually pretty wonderful.
Yeah.
In that it keeps me humble and honest about what people are looking for.
Yeah.
And also really informs my direction on how I interface with my clients.
Yeah.
People want to consume information in the way that they understand it. And there's no one size fits all discussion. So it keeps me on my toes.
Did you ever think when you're starting law school that this is what you'd be doing 30 years later or 20 years later? Did you ever think this is what you'd be doing?
No, I don't. I think I would love to say that I had a great direction. But I live my life thinking I need to just do the next thing that's calling, and give it a go. And that has worked out for me pretty darn well. Mm-hmm. It feels a little haphazard when I explain it that way, but there was a real draw and real knowledge that this was work I was really going to enjoy. And but I had no idea I'd be here. That's for sure.
Well, Heidi, I really appreciate your taking the time and sharing your story with me. I've interviewed a lot of lawyers, and I can always tell when somebody really enjoys what they do. And I could definitely tell that from you and how much you obviously enjoy what you do. So it was really a pleasure to have you as my guest.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
This is Richard Hsu and Heidi Mayon. Thanks.